Hi everyone, welcome again to Haftarah Half Hour with me, Jason from Spiritualbabies.net, and we're joined again this week, as always, by our friend Rabbi Joshua Neely.
Hello.
This week we are going through the Haftarah portion for Vayetzei, which is in Shir 12:13 through 14:10. It's a very poetic Haftarah portion this week in places. And it uses a lot of imagery, which I frankly found confusing. So I'm looking forward to your insight here, Rabbi.
I'll do my best.
Right, so I think we'll jump straight in. So it starts at 12:13. Then Jacob had to flee to the land of Aram. There Israel served for a wife. For a wife he had to guard sheep. But when the Lord brought Israel up from Egypt, it was through a prophet. Through a prophet they were guarded. Ephraim gave a bitter offense, and his Lord cast his crimes upon him and requited him for his mockery. We're set up here with a few different characters, aren't we? I'm assuming that when Jacob had to flee to the land of Aram, that Israel served for a wife. We're talking about when Jacob did 14 years for his tricky wife and then his requested wife.
So yes, this is the lead-in that gives us our straight-up connection to the Torah portion. That when Jacob left, he fled, from Esau, who was planning on killing him, and he went off to serve Lavan. And as you pointed out, served a total of 14 years for the two wives. Well, he got Leah first, had the 7 days of wedding celebration. Then he had Rachel and paid off the debt for the next 7 years.
And then we have, but then the Lord brought Israel up from Egypt. Who are we talking about? Are we talking about the actual Israel there, and this is Prophet Moses?
So that's one of the things that we'll see throughout the Haftarah, not just this one, but really throughout many of the Haftarot, is the prophets will play with the term Israel to mean both the specific person, Jacob, as well as the entire nation. And the same is going to happen a little bit later on here with Ephraim, that Ephraim is both a particular tribe referring to the northern kingdom of Israel, but Ephraim can also be a collective noun meaning for the entire nation.
So I think for many of our viewers, Ephraim is going to be one of the foggier labels, and especially in this passage, gave bitter offense, and his Lord cast his crimes upon him and requited him for his mockery.
It's idolatry straight up and down. So we're talking really here about the northern kingdom, which had broken off after the reign of Solomon, and the northern kingdom broke off for a good reason, which was to say that Solomon's son, who had taken over, was a terrible king. And unfortunately, rather than breaking off and continuing their allegiance to God, they broke off their allegiance to God as well, and became a wholly idolatrous nation in the north, and set up, as we're going to mention in just a few verses, a whole system of worship centered around cow-type idols, and it really didn't go well for them.
When Ephraim spoke piety, he was exalted in Israel, but he incurred guilt through Baal, and so he died. And so he died. I mean, they didn't die, right? It's tough when we talk about the lost tribes. We know they're going to come back, but I suppose physically they're not here. Is that what they're talking about? Is that the death they're speaking about?
Well, it's really talking here about the spiritual death of the northern kingdom, that they were once dedicated, and the northern tribes were as connected to Jerusalem and the worship of God as any other. But when they split for political reasons, they reverted to the constant temptation of idolatry, and in a sense, they spiritually became dead. Now, after Hosea's time, that's when we're going to have the destruction of the northern kingdom and the lost tribes that will be scattered by the Assyrian onslaught. But here we're really talking more about a spiritual death.
And now they go on sinning, They have made their molten images, idols by their skill, from their silver, wholly the work of craftsmen. Yet for these they appoint men to sacrifice. They are wont to kiss calves. So that's really talking more about their idolatry and their making idols and things.
Exactly. It's focusing on the idea that they have a real God. That is to say, that we saw back up in verse 14 of chapter 12. That brought them out of Egypt, that guided them with the prophet, and as we saw in the beginning of chapter 13, when they were connected to God, things were good. And yet now they've chosen to worship things that they themselves have made by their own hand. And Hosea, just like all of the other prophets, is just flabbergasted that people would build something with their hands and set it up and then claim this is what had saved them, delivered them, protected them, when they should know that it's just something they built with their own hand. The Talmud talks about this verse about making things with their hands and the images, that everybody would basically make their own idol, that everyone would design, as it were, custom make their own god, and then they would keep it with them in their pocket and carry it around with them. And whenever they thought of it, they'd take it out and they'd kiss it. And this fetishism of and self directedness is really one of the main flaws of idolatry, because a true God is meant to give us guidance and direction that we could not come to on our own, whereas idols are designed to be wholly within our own grasp, quite literally in our hand, so that we are the ones who are in control of them. And that is the spiritual poison of idolatry, because we end up only reaffirming what we want to reaffirm rather than stretching ourselves to be our better self.
Assuredly, they shall be like the morning clouds, like dew so early gone, like chaff whirled away from the threshing floor, and like smoke from a lattice. Only I, the Lord, have been your God, ever since the land of Egypt. You have never known a true God but me. You have never had a helper other than me. I looked after you in the desert, in the thirsty land. When they grazed, they were sated. When they were sated, they grew haughty, and so they forgot me. So I became like a lion to them, like a leopard. I lurk on the way. Like a bear robbed from a young, I attack them. I rip open the casing of their hearts. I will devour them there like a lion. The beasts of the field shall mangle them.
Well, I mean, it's so powerful because it is our reason for existence. That is to say, we are only around, we are only Israel because God chose to take us out of the land of Egypt. And that means everything afterwards is dependent upon that starting point. Everything afterwards is contingent upon acknowledging God as the one who delivered us. And of course, our trust in God should be equally dependent upon the fact that if God delivered us in the past, then the future as well, God will fulfill the promises of redemption. But what we see time and time again is that despite all that God has done for us, both as humanity as well as specifically as Israel, when we are comfortable, we tend to forget that. When we are sated, as the prophet puts it, we get arrogant. And when we get arrogant, we don't think we need God. And the very interesting part, apart from the very violent metaphors that are being used in verses 7 and 8, is that God is trying to say that the catastrophe that's falling us, the catastrophe that is befalling us is through God, not through some other force. It's not some other deity, some other spiritual power. It's God can equally be our defender as well as our attacker, depending upon where we are in our relationship.
You are undone, O Israel. You had no help but me. Where now is your king? Let him save you. Where are the chieftains in all your towns, whom you demanded, give us a king and officers? I gave you kings in my ire. I've read that as anger, so if, like me, I had to look that word up, it's anger. And take them away with my wrath. Ephraim's guilt is bound up, his sin is stored away, pangs of childbirth assail him, and the babe is not wise, for this is no time to survive at the birth stool of babes. Can you elaborate on that one? That in particular is beyond me.
Well, first of all, let's make sure we understand the 9, 10, and 11 verses there. You know, the notion of let your king save you, and we're talking again directed mostly at the northern kingdom here, where they had a series of kings that were, well, rotten. You know, the annals of the kings of Israel is not full of good kings. In fact, the northern kingdom never gets a single king that's considered good by any measure. And yet, the people wanted kings. We know about this before the appointment of Saul, and we know that people wanted to have a king. So this is being put up as being the parallel to the idols here. So just as the people wanted to be in control of their own destiny with an idol, so too they wanted to be in control of their destiny with a king. And God is basically saying, yeah, okay, so your idols can't save you and your kings can't save you, because the only thing that can save you is me, God. So recognize what you've done by how you've tried to do what you thought would make you happy, what you thought would make you safe, and in fact has made you more vulnerable and in worse condition than ever. But when we get to 12 and 13, this imagery then of childbirth, childbirth is the ultimate expression of both pain and danger in the ancient world. It was a time when of course, women were going through no anesthetic and going through childbirth, but it was also a time when the survival rate of both mother and child was very, very low. We almost take it for granted that the vast majority of women and children survive, but that would not have been the case during that time. So what he's basically saying here is that you're going to go through all of the pain and suffering of childbirth, and you're going to have nothing to show for it. You're going to go through all of the miserable side, and yet there will be no child at the other end. There will be no life that comes out of this. You are going to have that suffering without the benefit that comes from childbirth, which is to have that baby in your arms when you're done.
From Sheol itself I will save them, redeem them from very death. Where, O death, your plagues, your pestilence, where, O Sheol? Revenge shall be far from my thoughts. For though he flourished among reeds, a blast, a wind from the Lord, shall come blowing up from the wilderness. His fountain shall be parched, his spring dried up. That wind shall plunder treasures, every lovely object. Sheol is the grave, right? It's coming from a tradition. In not being brought up Jewish, we're kind of told that Sheol is a grave and or even hell. But I get the impression from reading that it's more of a kind of the death and then the place where you are when you're dead. Like the lack of existence. It's a very difficult term.
It's never explained, 100% clearly within the Tanakh itself. But Sheol is really meant to be the image of the grave itself, meaning the hole in the ground into which the body is placed, which is very, very difficult for most of us to face and to consider ourselves being in there. It's also used metaphorically as a parallel, for death itself. Sheol is not any way connected to punishment in particular. There's other discussions in rabbinic literature of the punishment in our afterlife, but Sheol is sort of used more as just a stand-in for the place you go in between death and the world to come.
So here we see God telling Israel that he's going to kind of pluck them from the fire.
Well, fire unfortunately comes too close to some of the connotations of hell, but it is a rather remarkable counterpoint to what we've just been reading, which is all about the guilt of Israel, all about the guilt of Ephraim, and yet here we see in verse 14 that God is saying that no matter that, God will still redeem them eventually from death. That no matter how bad things are, there will nevertheless be redemption.
The part that starts, for though he flourish among reeds. What does that mean?
The reeds usually were a sign of a lot of water in the area, meaning that it was a fertile river area, and so you would think that if you're flourishing among the reeds, things would be fine, but a strong blast will come and would wipe that out, and the spring would dry up, and you're left with nothing. So this is that point counterpoint, point counterpoint back and forth here. And we're going to see even more of that in chapter 14, that things will look like they're okay, and then there will be catastrophe, but then there will be redemption. But that doesn't mean that we've been given a free ride. That we still have to actually return to God, again, as chapter 14 is going to show.
Samaria must bear her guilt, for she has defied her God. They shall fall by the sword, their infants shall be dashed to death, and their women with child ripped open. Wow. This is Samaria, the Samaritan Samaria?
No, this is Samaria. I mean, it's yes and no. It's the Samaria that is connected to the origin of the word Samaritan, but this is talking about the northern kingdom with the term Samaria as being the stand-in term. So it's still talking about the northern kingdom.
Oh, well, that's completely new to me. That's it's awesome. Yeah, I like learning new stuff. Brilliant. Return, O Israel, to the Lord your God, for you have fallen because of your sin. Take words with you and return to the Lord. Say to him. This is actually I've covered this in a few videos. I'll put the links below. Some of the work I've done where we counterpoint the New Testament teachings against the Tanakh teachings, and this is quite a famous misquote, but obviously we're getting the real deal here. Take words with you and return to the Lord. Say to him, forgive all guilt and accept what is good. Instead of bulls, we will pay the offering of our lips. Assyria shall not save us. No more will we ride on our steeds, nor ever again will we call our handiwork our God. Since in you alone orphans find pity. It's hard for me not to jump on this because this is what I'm used to doing. But in this, just because hopefully we've got a good mixed audience of different faiths that are watching this, and I wanted to get something from it. In this instance, the bulls are prayers and repentance. They're not actual bulls. Is that right?
Well, it's saying that instead of the bulls, that is, instead of the sacrifices that we offered, that we will instead do what we call tefillah, that we will do prayer, which is considered to be the offerings of the lips, and to recognize that is the way that we will connect to God when we finally return, when we finally answer this calls, and that we'll understand that we can return to God with or without the full sacrificial service being in effect. And it's extremely important as a theological principle that despite the fact that the temple is not built, despite the fact that the altar is not lit, despite the fact that the sacrifices are not being offered, that God has provided a means for us to seek atonement for our transgressions. And it's called tshuva, it's called the returning, the repentance, which we can do with our lips and our actions, even if we don't have a bull to offer.
And that blows me away. And just in case you are watching this and you are maybe thinking this is the only instance, it's not. You can have a look at Ezekiel 18, Isaiah 55:7. It's over and over and over and over again. Return to me, return to me, return to me. Anyway, so Assyria will not save us. They understand that there's not going to there's not going to be any great sweeping people that are going to come in and take them away. And they're basically admitting, aren't they? They're listing the issues that they've done and that they're not going to do them again.
Well, Israel, both the north and the south, historically, geographically, was at a very interesting point. They were always tempted to make the right deal with whichever great power they thought was going to be in charge. And so the idea that they could maybe make a sweet deal with Assyria and become a vassal of their empire was very, very tempting. The same way that the South will try to make a deal with Egypt against the Babylonians. So there was always an idea that we could find a way to be powerful, successful, without having to rely on God and without having all the inconvenience of doing what God's asked us to do. And this is saying in verse 4, no, it's not going to work like that. Our security, our future, our present is going to be based upon our connection to God, because it's only in God that we find pity and mercy.
So from 5, I will heal their affliction. Generously will I take them back in love, for my anger has turned away from them. I will be to Israel like dew. He shall blossom like a lily, he shall strike root like a Lebanon tree. His boughs shall spread out far, his beauty shall be like that of the olive tree, his fragrance like that of Lebanon. They who sit in his shade shall be revived. They shall bring to life new grain, they shall blossom like the vine. His scent shall be like the wine of Lebanon. Ephraim shall say, what more have I to do with idols? When I respond to him and look, I become like a verdant cypress. Your fruit is provided by me. That's beautiful, isn't it?
It's a wonderful makeup for all of the bloody imagery earlier on in the Haftarah. That this is the promise that when we turn to God, we can dwell in peace and security and plenty, and then we'll recognize what's the point of all the idol stuff, right? I mean, they didn't do anything except lead us astray. So this is what life should be like. To be able to enjoy the grain, to enjoy the wine, to enjoy the beautiful smell, and then to be embedded it with strong roots, and to be watered by dew, meaning watered almost miraculously, and allowed to sprout and blossom in every way. This is the ultimate promise.
He who is wise will consider these words. He who is prudent will take note of them. For the paths of the Lord are smooth. The righteous can walk on them, while sinners stumble on them. I like that. That bit at the end is great. I may just pull that out and use that myself or something. So there's a little reminder at the end to the people that are reading this. Years on, this is what's great about the Torah portions every week and the Haftarah portion, is that you can take that, and although this happened to a people already, we know that this is also kind of happening now, and in the future. And it's lovely. There's that caveat at the end that says, listen to what I've said, and that's as relevant today as it ever was.
Absolutely, and this wonderful phrase at the end, as you pointed out, that the paths of the Lord are smooth, the righteous can walk on them, while sinners stumble on them, is a great reminder that it isn't hard to live a Torah life. It gets easier the more you walk it, and it's not a problem. However, you can walk that same path and end up putting yourself in trouble. There's a discussion in the Talmud about this verse, where it gives the example of the Passover Seder, of eating the Seder at Pesach. And they say, you can have two people, one who is eating it as a symbol of celebration of our redemption from Egypt and the promise of redemption for life in the future. And then there's someone else who's eating the same Seder, but they're doing it because it's a really nice feast. And they're pointing out that path of God, the Seder that's being laid out, if you walk on it with that sense of, I'm doing this for the good reasons, is going to be an amazing and smooth experience. And if you walk on them with a very selfish or self-centered reason, then you're going to stumble. And it's not just enough to do it, it's a point to do it for the right reasons.
Well, there we are, ladies and gents. We've come to the end of this week's Haftarah Half Hour. I want to thank Rabbi Neely for joining us, especially when he's so sick today. The poor guy. So thank you very much, Rabbi Neely.
Thank you. Studying always makes me feel better. It's the best tonic.
And we will see you all again next week. Stick around to the end of the video and you'll see what the Torah portion for next week is, or the Haftarah portion is for next week. Don't forget to comment underneath this video and subscribe to the channel and like the video and share the video and do all the socially stuff. And we'll see you all again very soon. Bye-bye.